You ever have a moment where one sentence changes everything? That's what happened at my dad's promotion party. My name's Maria Coleman, 30 years old, and I've spent my life in the shadow of my younger brother. He's the golden child showered with private schools, Paris vacations, and a shiny BMW for his 18th birthday. All because he was the sick kid who could do no wrong. Me, I was the afterthought, scraping by on my own dime, clawing my way through college with no one cheering. But I built something big, something nobody saw coming. At my dad's big night, surrounded by family who barely knew me, my brother decided to take a swing. Still slaving away at that desk job, Maria. He sneered his smirk, daring me to stay small. I could have stayed quiet like always. Snorts, instead, I dropped the bomb. I owned a penthouse in Monaco. His face twisted. His voice cracked as he shouted, "You're lying." My mom froze. My dad fumbled his drink, and the room went dead silent. I didn't plan to spill my secret, but his jab lit a fuse. That night wasn't just about his meltdown or their shock. It set off a chain of lies and betrayals I never expected. One sentence from me later in the chaos turned our family upside down for good. Stick around to find out what I said and why it broke them. Ever had a family member underestimate you only to regret it? Drop your story in the comments and tell me where it happened. Our Indianapolis home looked perfect, but it hid a lot of pain. From the outside, our family seemed like the American dream. 2 kids, supportive parents, a stable life in Indianapolis. But inside, I was always the one who didn't fit. My younger brother, the baby of the family, was their star. He'd been sick as a toddler, spending months in the hospital, and that made him untouchable. My parents called him their miracle, their pride. They enrolled him in private music lessons, sent him to fancy summer camps in Switzerland, and bragged about his every move. I was just Maria, the older sister who was supposed to understand. By 15, I was working weekends at a local bakery, kneading dough and scrubbing counters to save for college. My parents didn't bat an eye when I stayed up late studying for scholarships. "You're so independent," my mom would say, like it was a compliment, but it wasn't. It was their way of saying they didn't need to bother with me. My dad, always busy with his corporate job, had big dreams for my brother to follow in his footsteps. He's got leadership potential he'd beam while I was dismissed as too focused on numbers. They wanted me to chase something flashier, not finance, which they called boring. It wasn't just them. My aunt and uncle, who lived nearby, were just as bad. They'd promised to help with my college fund when I was accepted into a finance program. I spent weeks researching schools, imagining their support. But when my brother needed extra tutoring for his gifted classes, they funneled their money to him instead. "He's got so much potential," my aunt said, not even looking at me. My uncle just nodded like I wasn't in the room. I swallowed the sting, but it left a mark. The only person who saw me was my grandma. She was different, sharp, quiet, and fiercely independent. When I was 16, she handed me a worn copy of The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. "This is worth more than their empty promises," she said, her eyes steady. She sat me down at her kitchen table, teaching me how to read stock charts and set up a small investment account with my bakery savings. "Start small, Maria," she told me. "Let it grow." Those afternoons with her were my lifeline. She didn't care about my brother's piano recital or his European trips. She believed in me, but even her faith couldn't erase the unfairness. Every time my parents threw a party for my brother's achievements, like getting a B in math, they barely noticed my straight A's. I'd come home with scholarship offers, and my mom would just nod, saying, "That's nice, Maria," before asking if I'd seen my brother's latest award. My dad would chime in, "He's going to run a company someday." I'd bite my tongue, knowing they'd never see me the same way. The worst was when I overheard them talking to my aunt one night. "Maria's so practical," my mom said like it was a flaw. "She'll be fine on her own." My dad agreed. "Our boy needs us more." I stood frozen in the hallway, my scholarship letter crumpled in my hand. That moment burned into me. They didn't just favor him, they'd written me off. Working at the bakery taught me more than my parents ever did. I learned to budget, to hustle, to keep my head down. By 17, I'd saved enough to cover my first semester's books, and my grandma's investment tips had turned my $200 into $500. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I stopped expecting anything from my family. Their focus on my brother, his lessons, his trips, his potential only pushed me harder. I wasn't perfect. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering why I wasn't enough. But those thoughts didn't last. My grandma's voice would creep in. "You don't need their approval, Maria." She was right. I didn't need their money or their praise. I needed to prove I could make it without them. When I got accepted into a finance program at 18, I didn't even tell my parents until the deposit was paid. They were too busy planning my brother's graduation party. My aunt and uncle sent him a check for future expenses. I got a card with $20, but I didn't care anymore. I had my scholarship, my savings, and my grandma's book tucked under my arm. I was ready to leave. The unfairness of those years shaped me. It wasn't just about money or attention. It was about being invisible. My parents, my aunt, my uncle, they all bet on the wrong kid. And I was determined to show them how wrong they were. After high school, I moved to Louisville to start over. Louisville gave me a chance to be more than Ryan's sister. Moving to Louisville at 18 was like breathing for the first time. Away from Indianapolis, I wasn't just the overlooked sibling. I enrolled in a finance program, graduated with honors, and landed a job at a small startup in the city's growing financial district. The company was scrappy, focused on risk analysis for mid-sized firms. And they took a chance on me. I dove in, spending late nights crunching data, spotting trends others missed. My knack for predicting market shifts earned me respect and a hefty chunk of equity when the startup got acquired by a bigger player 3 years later. That payout changed everything. Grandma's lessons from those kitchen table talks never left me. Back in 2017, when cryptocurrency was still a niche topic, her advice echoed, "Take smart risks, Maria." I studied the market, invested a portion of my savings in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and watched my portfolio grow through the boom years. By 2020, I'd cashed out enough to buy a penthouse in Monaco, a sleek ocean view property that felt like a dream. It was my secret triumph, a symbol of everything I'd built without anyone's help. I didn't tell my family. I'd learned long ago they'd only compare me to my brother, and I wasn't ready for their judgment. Meanwhile, my brother was living a different life. He had moved to Chicago, bankrolled by our parents, who still saw him as their golden boy. His Instagram was a parade of excess yacht parties, designer clothes, rooftop bars. "Living my best life," he'd caption while mom and dad wired him money for rent or business ventures. I didn't follow him, but mutual friends would send me screenshots shaking their heads. His friend Kristen Walsh, who'd once competed with me for a high school scholarship, was always in those posts, egging him on. She'd been bitter when I beat her out for that award, and now she was whispering in his ear, spreading rumors that I was just a cubicle drone in Louisville. I let it slide. Their opinions didn't pay my bills. But it stung when Mom called, her voice bright with pride as she gushed about my brother's latest trip to Miami. "He's networking with big names," she'd say, while I held my tongue about closing $1 million deal for my firm. When she asked about my job, it was an afterthought. "Still doing that finance thing," she'd say like it was a hobby. Dad was worse. He'd lecture me about thinking bigger, as if my career was a stepping stone to something else. They never asked about my life. Never visited my apartment. I was still the practical one, the one who'd be fine. Kristen's rumors spread further than I expected. At a family friend's wedding, I overheard someone say, "Maria's just a number cruncher, nothing like her brother." I smiled politely, but inside I was seething. Kristen had convinced half our hometown I was some low-level clerk, while my brother was destined for greatness. She didn't know I'd just flown back from Monaco finalizing paperwork for my property. I didn't need their validation, but the dismissal noted at me. My work kept me grounded. After the startup's acquisition, I joined a boutique investment firm advising clients on high-stakes portfolios. I was damn good, and my bosses noticed. They gave me lead on projects, trusted my calls, and rewarded me with bonuses that padded my savings. I'd sit in my Louisville apartment, a modest but modern place, and check my Monaco investment account, watching it grow. That penthouse wasn't just a purchase. It was proof I'd outgrown their expectations. But the calls from home never stopped. Mom would leave voicemails always about my brother. He's pitching a startup idea, she'd say. Or, he's meeting investors. I'd listen, delete, and move on. Once Dad called to ask if I could help out with my brother's latest venture. I said no, citing work. But the truth was I was done bailing him out. They didn't know I was sitting on millions and I wasn't about to tell them. The worst was a text from Kristen forwarded by a friend. "Maria's wasting her life in a dead-end job," it read, sent to my brother with a laughing emoji. I saved it. Not sure why. Maybe I knew I'd need it later. Her jealousy was obvious. She'd never forgiven me for that scholarship. But I didn't confront her. I had bigger things to focus on. Louisville became my sanctuary. I built a life there. Friends who celebrated my wins, colleagues who respected my hustle. But the weight of my family's indifference lingered. Every time I saw my brother's posts or heard Mom's voice praising him, that old feeling crept back. I was invisible to them. I'd scroll through photos of my Monaco penthouse, reminding myself I didn't need their approval. I'd made it on my own. Still, a part of me wondered if they'd ever see me for who I'd become. I didn't want their praise. I wanted them to stop underestimating me. That tension simmered quiet, but constant as I navigated my double life. The finance was in Louisville and the secret property owner in Monaco. Then came the invite to Dad's promotion party. The party was at an upscale Indianapolis venue, all glass and lights. I hadn't been back to Indianapolis in months. But Dad's promotion to regional director wasn't something I could skip. Driving up from Louisville, I braced myself for the usual family dynamic. My brother stealing the spotlight, Mom and Dad fawning over him, and me fading into the background. The venue was packed with their colleagues, friends, and relatives, the air buzzing with clinking glasses and forced laughter. I slipped in quietly, hoping to blend in, but my brother spotted me right away. He was holding court near the bar, his friend Kristen Walsh at his side, both of them radiating smug confidence. They were mid-story about their recent Dubai trip, his voice loud enough to carry. Private villa, rooftop, infinity pool. He bragged, tossing a glance my way like he knew I was listening. Kristen chimed in, her smile sharp. "You should have seen the yacht we chartered." Their audience ate it up, nodding like they'd never heard anything so impressive. I rolled my eyes, grabbing a drink to avoid engaging. But he wasn't done. Spotting me, he called out, "Hey Maria," still stuck with spreadsheets. The room chuckled and Kristen's laugh cut through her eyes, glinting with malice. "She's not exactly living the high life like you," she said, nudging him. The jab landed, but I kept my face neutral. I'd heard worse. Grandma found me moments later, her presence a quiet anchor. She pulled me aside away from the crowd and asked about my work. "How's that firm treating you?" she said, her voice low but warm. I started to answer, mentioning a recent project, but my brother interrupted, striding over with Kristen trailing. "Nobody cares about Maria's boring job," he said, half joking, half challenging. Grandma's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Kristen added, "Yeah, she's not exactly on your level." I clenched my glass, feeling the old resentment bubble up. They were baiting me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay silent. The night dragged on with my brother and his friend circling back to their stories. Every anecdote was a Flex Dubai Hotel's VIP events connections they'd made. Mom and Dad lapped it up, beaming as they introduced him to their colleagues. "Our son's got big plans," Dad said, clapping him on the back. Mom nodded, her smile wide. "He's always been so ambitious." I stood nearby, invisible as usual, my own achievements tucked away like a secret. I wasn't allowed to share. My aunt and uncle, mingling with the guests, didn't even glance my way. It was like I didn't exist. Then came the moment that shifted everything. My brother, emboldened by the attention, cornered me near the dessert table. "So, Maria," he said, his tone mocking, "what's your life like these days? Still crunching numbers in that little office?" Kristen smirked, leaning in. "Bet you're jealous of his adventures." I could have brushed it off like I always did, but something snapped. Maybe it was the years of being dismissed, or maybe it was the way he looked at me like I'd never measure up. I met his gaze and said, Actually, I own a penthouse in Monaco." The words hung in the air. His smirk froze, then twisted into disbelief. "You're lying." He spat, his voice loud enough to draw eyes. "How could you not tell us?" Kristen's jaw dropped, her confidence crumbling. Mom, standing nearby, went pale, her wine glass trembling. Dad, caught mid-conversation, fumbled his fork, letting it clatter to the floor. The room seemed to pause, whispers rippling through the crowd. I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt the weight of their attention, and it wasn't pity or dismissal. It was shock. My brother's face wrinkled. "That's impossible," he shouted, stepping closer. "You a penthouse? Where'd you even get the money?" I didn't answer. Grandma's hand brushed my arm, a silent signal of support. Mom stammered. "Maria, is this true?" Her voice was small, like she couldn't process it. Dad just stared, his usual confidence gone. Kristen tried to recover, muttering, "She's probably exaggerating," but no one was listening to her anymore. The power had shifted, and I felt it in my bones. But something else stuck with me. Earlier, during a lull in his bragging, my brother had asked an odd question. "So, you ever deal with finances in Monaco?" He'd said, his tone too casual, his eyes darting away. It wasn't like him to care about my work, and the question lingered. A red flag I couldn't shake. Had he heard something? Was he fishing? I didn't know, but it put me on edge. The party didn't recover after my bombshell. My brother sulked, avoiding me, while Kristen hovered, throwing me dirty looks. Mom and Dad tried to act normal, but their smiles were strained. My aunt and uncle, who'd overheard, whispered to each other, their expressions unreadable. I didn't care. I'd spent years swallowing their disregard. And for once I'd made them see me. As I drove away, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a strange mix of triumph and unease. I'd never meant to reveal my secret, but they'd pushed me too far. My brother's outburst, Mom's shock, Dad's silence. It all felt like a victory. But that question about Monaco noted at me. He wasn't smart enough to ask something like that out of nowhere. Something was off, and I needed to figure out what. Back in Louisville, Ryan's odd question stuck with me. A week after the party, I checked my email and saw something off. Back in Louisville, I couldn't shake my brother's strange question about Monaco. It wasn't like him to care about my finances, and his tone had been too calculated, too probing. Sitting at my desk, I opened my inbox, expecting routine work messages. Instead, a notification from my bank flagged an inquiry about my credit score. My stomach dropped. I hadn't applied for anything, but someone had used my details. Digging deeper, I found an email forwarded from a lender addressed to me, but sent to an account I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Loan application, $15,000 approved." The email contained documents, a W-2 form, and a credit report, both in my name, but with inconsistencies. The income listed was inflated, and the email address tied to the application was a near-identical copy of mine with a single letter changed. I froze, piecing it together. Only one person could have pulled this off. My brother had access to my old financial records from when we shared a family cloud account years ago. Snorts. He'd faked my identity to secure a loan, banking on my clean credit to cover his tracks. I spent hours cross-referencing the evidence. The lender's records showed the application was submitted 2 weeks before the party, around the time he'd asked about Monaco. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a test to see if I'd notice. Worse, I found a text thread forwarded by a mutual friend. In it, he bragged to Kristen Walsh. "My sister's covering my debt. No problem." Kristen's reply was a string of laughing emojis followed by, "Make sure she doesn't find out." My blood boiled. This wasn't just a prank. It was calculated, and Kristen was in on it, stirring the pot like she always had since our high school scholarship days. Her motives were clear. She'd never forgiven me for outshining her back then. And now she was using my brother to drag me down. I kept digging, pulling up his Instagram. One post caught my eye. A photo of him on a Maldives beach captioned, "Big thanks to my family for making this happen." The comments were full of praise, people assuming I'd bankrolled his trip. He'd spread the lie that I was his financial backup, boosting his image while painting me as the beautiful sister who'd never say no. It was a slap in the face, and he'd done it right under my nose. I called Mom hoping for clarity, but she brushed it off. "You're misunderstanding him," she said, her voice defensive. "He's just struggling, Maria. You know how hard he's trying." I cut her off, unwilling to hear the same excuses. "He stole my identity," I said, my tone flat. She paused, then mumbled something about talking to him. I hung up, knowing she'd take his side, like always. Dad didn't even bother calling. Their silence spoke louder than any apology could. The betrayal cut deep, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I contacted a lawyer the next day, a sharp woman who specialized in financial fraud. She reviewed the evidence, fake email drive, W2 text messages, Instagram post, and confirmed I had a case. "This is identity theft," she said. "We can freeze the loan and file a report." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. My brother's actions had put my finances at risk, and with a penthouse in Monaco tied to my name, I couldn't afford loose ends. I started researching how to sell the property, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to protect myself. A clean break felt like the only way to avoid more of his schemes. The process wasn't simple. I reached out to a real estate agent in Monaco discussing a potential sale and the paperwork involved. The penthouse was my pride, a symbol of everything I'd earned, but keeping it felt like inviting more trouble. Every time I thought about my brother's smug face at the party or Kristen's taunting texts, the anger flared again. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't just fighting for my credit score. I was fighting for my peace. I kept the evidence locked in a folder on my laptop, adding to it daily. Another friend sent me a screenshot of Kristen posting on her story, hinting at family drama with a cryptic. "Some people can't handle the truth." It was pathetic, but it fueled me. She thought she could hide behind her petty jabs, but I was building a case that would expose them both. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet for now to avoid tipping them off. So I did, but the weight of their betrayal grew heavier each day. Mom called again, her tone softer this time. "Can you just help him out?" she pleaded. "He's your brother." I laughed a bitter sound. "He's not my problem," I said, and hung up. Her words echoed the same blind loyalty I'd grown up with, but I was done playing along. Grandma was the only one who didn't push. When I told her what happened, she just listened, then said, "You're stronger than they are, Maria." Her faith kept me grounded, but it didn't erase the sting of being stabbed in the back by my own family. As I sat in my Louisville apartment, staring at the lawyer's email outlining next steps, I felt a shift. This wasn't just about money or a penthouse. It was about trust or the lack of it. My brother had gambled on me, staying silent on my loyalty to a family that never chose me. He'd miscalculated. I wasn't the same girl who'd let their dismissal slide. I was ready to fight. And if that meant selling my dream to protect my future, I'd do it without hesitation. Soon, Ryan's lies started to spiral out of control. 2 months later, Ryan's perfect image began to crack. The fallout from my brother's lies didn't take long to surface. He'd built his brand on flashy posts and empty promises, but the cracks were showing. A Chicago-based marketing firm had signed him for a TikTok campaign, expecting a series of sponsored videos. Instead, he pocketed the advance and ghosted them, delivering nothing. The firm didn't hesitate. They filed a lawsuit demanding repayment and damages. Word spread fast, and his carefully curated online persona started to unravel. It got worse. Kristen Walsh, his so-called ally, turned on him. She leaked a recorded phone call to a gossip account exposing him in a way he couldn't spin. In the audio, he berated the marketing firm's manager, calling them clueless losers who didn't deserve his time. Then he turned his venom on me, sneering, "My sister's too stingy to help sitting on her precious money." The clip went viral, racking up thousands of views. Overnight, he lost over 10,000 followers, with comments piling up calling him entitled and fake. Kristen's move was no accident. She'd always been out for herself. And now she was cutting ties to save her own reputation. I watched it unfold from Louisville. A mix of vindication and disgust settling in. My brother's mess was his own, but my parents refused to see it that way. Mom called first, her voice trembling with urgency. "Maria, you have to help him," she pleaded. "He's being sued and he's in over his head. Sell that penthouse." It's just a house. Dad followed up, his tone colder. Your brother needs a fresh start. Do it for the family. Their words stung, not because I cared about their approval, but because they still chose him even after everything. Then came a text from my brother himself. We're family, Maria. It read, you've got that Monaco place, share the wealth. I'd do it for you. The audacity made my skin crawl. He wasn't sorry for stealing my identity or dragging my name through the mud. He just wanted a bailout cloaked in fake sentiment. I typed a reply, short and final. Face, snorts, your own consequences. Then I blocked his number. I'd spent years carrying their expectations, but I was done being their safety net. My decision to sell the penthouse wasn't about them. It was about protecting myself. The lawsuit against my brother, combined with his earlier fraud, made me realize how vulnerable my assets were. I contacted the Monaco real estate agent I'd spoken to before, and we finalized a deposit agreement with an international firm. The buyer, a European investor, offered a fair price enough to clear any lingering risks and fund something bigger than myself. Signing the papers felt bittersweet. That penthouse had been my triumph, proof I'd risen above their dismissal. But letting it go meant freedom from their chaos. I didn't want the money to sit in a bank. My childhood, always overshadowed, always undervalued, gave me an idea. I started researching how to set up a scholarship fund for kids who grew up like I did, overlooked and underestimated. I wanted to give them the chance I'd fought for, the kind my parents never offered me. I met with a financial advisor in Louisville, sketching out a plan to launch the fund once the sale closed. It wasn't just charity. It was my way of rewriting the story, turning pain into purpose. Mom didn't let up. Her calls came daily, each one more desperate. He's your brother, she'd say, as if that erased his betrayal. You're being selfish, Maria. I stopped answering, letting her voicemails pile up. Grandma was the only one who understood. When I told her about the scholarship fund, she smiled, her eyes bright. That's you, Maria, building something real. Her words carried me through the moments when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I was too harsh. But I wasn't. My brother had made his choices, and I wasn't responsible for fixing them. Christine's betrayal of my brother didn't surprise me, but it added fuel to my resolve. She'd leaked that recording to distance herself, but it backfired. Her own followers called her out for being two-faced, and her online presence took a hit. I didn't care enough to gloat, but it felt like a small piece of justice. She'd spent years trying to undermine me from high school to now, and her schemes were crumbling alongside his. As the penthouse sale moved forward, I prepared for what came next. My parents' pressure, my brother's entitlement, their refusal to hold him accountable, it all pointed to one thing: they'd never change. I couldn't keep dodging their demands or pretending we were a normal family. The scholarship fund was my future, but first I needed closure. I started planning a final conversation, not to reconcile, but to set boundaries they couldn't cross. I'd face them on my terms in my city and make it clear I was done with their games. Sitting in my Louisville apartment, I looked at the contract for the penthouse sale, the advisor's notes for the scholarship fund, and my lawyer's latest email about my brother's fraud case. The pieces were falling into place, but the weight of their betrayal lingered. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my name. I was fighting for the life I'd built, the one they'd never valued. And I was ready to protect it, no matter what it took. I decided to face my family one last time. I invited everyone to my Louisville apartment for dinner. The decision to confront my family wasn't impulsive. After months of their pressure and my brother's lies, I needed to draw a line. My apartment modest, but mine was the perfect setting, my territory, my rules. I sent invitations to Mom, Dad, my brother, Grandma, my aunt, and my uncle. Kristen wasn't welcome. Her role in this mess was clear, and I didn't need her drama. The table was set simply, but in the center, I placed a USB drive, its contents, a ticking bomb, fake emails, Kristen's leaked recording, and clips of my brother's TikTok fiasco. They arrived together, the tension palpable. As they stepped inside, Mom's smile was forced, Dad's handshake stiff. My brother slouched in, avoiding my gaze, while my aunt and uncle exchanged wary looks. Grandma, as always, hugged me tightly, her presence a quiet strength. I served dinner, roasted chicken, nothing extravagant, and let small talk fill the silence. But I wasn't here to play host. When the plates were cleared, I picked up the USB and held it up. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. I started with the evidence. Plugging the drive into my laptop, I pulled up the fake email my brother had used to secure a $15,000 loan in my name. "This is identity theft," I said, letting the screen speak for itself. Next, I played Kristen's leaked recording, his voice dripping with contempt as he called me stingy and insulted his business partners. Finally, I showed a montage of his TikTok videos where he bragged about deals he never delivered. Now part of a lawsuit. The room went still. My brother's face palled, his hands gripping the table. He tried to deflect. "That's not what it looks like," he stammered, his voice rising. "I was just borrowing Maria. You've got that penthouse. Why can't you help the family?" His audacity was almost laughable. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I signed the contract to sell it," I said. "The money is going to a scholarship fund for kids who were abandoned like I was. Not a cent goes to you." His jaw dropped, and for once he had no comeback. He slumped back, the fight draining out of him. My aunt spoke up, her tone sharp. "You're being too hard on him, Maria. He's young. He made mistakes." My uncle nodded, adding, "Family sticks together." I didn't flinch. I pointed to the screen where the email and recording still glowed. "This isn't a mistake. It's a crime." They fell silent, their defense crumbling under the weight of the truth. Mom's eyes filled with tears and Dad stared at the table, his usual authority gone. I turned to my parents. "You enabled him?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "You ignored his lies, his theft, and you pressured me to clean up his mess. That stops now." Mom sobbed, reaching for my hand, but I pulled back. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We should have seen it." Dad nodded, his voice. "We failed you, Maria." Their words were sincere, but they came too late. I'd spent years waiting for them to see me, and now their regret felt hollow. Grandma, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "You did the right thing, Maria," she said, her voice steady. "I'm proud of you." Her words hit me harder than I expected, a lifeline in the storm. I nodded, unable to speak, grateful for the one person who'd always believed in me. My brother, meanwhile, couldn't take it. He shoved his chair back, muttering, "You're all against me," and stormed out the door, slamming behind him. No one followed. The room felt heavier after he left. My aunt and uncle avoided my gaze, their earlier protests forgotten. Mom tried again, her voice shaky. "Can we fix this, Maria?" I looked at her, then at Dad, their faces etched with guilt. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've carried your expectations for too long. I'm done." It wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. I'd spent my life proving I was enough, and I didn't need their approval anymore. As they left, Grandma lingered, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than they know," she said. I smiled, holding back tears. After they were gone, I stood in my quiet apartment, the USB still on the table. The weight of their betrayal, their excuses, their silence, it all fell away. For the first time, I felt unburdened, like I could breathe without their shadows hanging over me. I hadn't forgiven them, and maybe I never would. But I didn't need to. I'd built a life they couldn't touch, and that was enough. The scholarship fund was moving forward, the penthouse sale nearly complete. Those kids, the ones who felt invisible like I once did, would have a chance because of me. My brother's lies, my parents' mistakes, they couldn't take that away. I'd face them not to win, but to let go. And in that moment, I knew I was finally free. That night marked the end of my old life. 6 months later, I received a letter from a kid in my scholarship program. Life had shifted since that dinner in Louisville. The penthouse sale had closed, and the funds were now fueling a scholarship program that was changing lives. My days were filled with work meetings with advisors to expand the program and a new sense of purpose. I'd left the chaos of my family behind, and for the first time, I felt grounded, like I was exactly where I needed to be. My brother had faded from the spotlight. Word reached me through a mutual friend that he was crashing with buddies in Chicago, scraping by without the brand deals that once propped him up. His online presence, once his pride, was a ghost town, Sponsors had dropped him after the TikTok lawsuit and the leaked recording. He hadn't reached out since he stormed out of my apartment, and I didn't expect him to. His silence was a relief, a sign he'd finally run out of ways to drag me into his mess. Kristen Walsh was gone too. Her role in leaking my brother's recording had backfired, sparking a scandal that tanked her own reputation. Her social media accounts went dark, and mutual contacts said she'd left town chasing a fresh start somewhere else. I didn't care enough to wonder where. She'd been a thorn in my side for years, and her absence was one less weight to carry. My parents tried to reach me. Mom left voicemails, her voice soft with regret, asking to talk. Dad sent texts short and awkward, hinting at reconciliation. My aunt and uncle called once, their messages vague, but pleading. I didn't respond. The dinner had been my line in the sand, and I wasn't stepping back. Snorts. Cutting them off wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Their loyalty to my brother, their refusal to see me for years, it had built a wall I no longer wanted to climb. I changed my number, letting their calls fade into silence. Grandma was the exception. Her texts came sparingly, each one a quiet anchor. "You're doing good, Maria," she wrote after the scholarship program launched. "I'm so proud." Her words meant more than she'd ever know, a reminder that at least one person had always seen me. I replied with updates about the program, grateful for her steady presence in my life. The scholarship fund was thriving. In its first 6 months, it had supported dozens of kids covering school supplies, tutoring, and college prep courses. Each Snorts application told a story of resilience of kids who felt invisible but kept pushing. Reading them, I saw pieces of my own childhood overlooked, underestimated, but determined. The fund wasn't just money. It was a chance to rewrite their futures the way I'd fought to rewrite mine. I was invited to speak at a financial conference in Indianapolis. A chance to share my journey from a small-town kid to a woman who'd built her own path. Standing on that stage, I talked about resilience, about betting on yourself when no one else does. The audience listened, some jotting notes, others nodding. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright. "Your story got me through college," she said. "Thank you." Her words stayed with me, a spark that lit up the long road I'd traveled. Back in Louisville, the letter arrived. It was handwritten, the kind of thing you rarely see anymore. A teenager in the scholarship program had written it, thanking me for the support that let her attend a summer coding camp. "I thought no one cared," she wrote. "You showed me I can do this." I read it twice, my chest tight with emotion. That letter was proof that my choices, the penthouse sale, the fund, the distance from my family had built something real. I tucked it into a drawer, a reminder of why I'd kept going. As I stood in my apartment looking out over the city, I thought about the years I'd spent seeking approval from people who never gave it. My parents, my brother, even my aunt and uncle, they'd shaped me, but not in the way they thought. Their dismissal had taught me to rely on myself to find worth in my own reflection. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd built a life that was mine, surrounded by people who saw me, from the kids in the program to the colleagues who respected my work. The lesson was clear, carved into every step of this journey. Live true to yourself and don't chase the approval of those who don't value you. I'd spent too long trying to prove I was enough only to realize I always had been. The scholarship fund, the speech, the letter, they weren't just milestones. They were my truth. A life built on my terms. And that was worth more than any penthouse or family tie. I stood at my Louisville apartment window, smiling, knowing I'd made it through.